right, thanks, Dan. Dan's keeping an eye on us as well. You've done well, Dave. You pressed record. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Freedom Thinking for the Love of Life via donation online retreat. Day one. Moments one, which is ace, right at the beginning. We love doing these things. This is, how many of these have we done now?
8 or 9, I think. Yeah, we started in 2020, didn't we?
Yeah. So we love doing these, and we just want to thank everybody for being here. From different time zones, different backgrounds, bit of family in there. Some faces we know and some faces we don't. But we just want to thank everybody for taking the time to be here. We hope you receive benefit from it. We hope you enjoy it. And we hope over those that we're just meeting, we hope to meet more of you and spend more time with you. To begin with, we're just going to introduce ourselves. For those who don't know us, why we do this work. But just to get the businessy side out of the way for this is a via donation retreat. When we say via donation, we mean please donate whatever you prepared to donate, really. This is 3 days. We're going to be doing this for 3 days. We've got 3 guest speakers. We have got, tonight, we've got Dr. Keith Blevins, who some of you may or may not be aware of, a wonderful man. And tomorrow we've got Christine Heath, who I know a couple of you are aware of at least. And then Monday we have got Dr. Dickon Bettinger speaking as well. So it'll be all 5 of us. This is a place there'll be times where people can open up for conversations. We can have conversations, we have questions, reflections, observations and whatnot. So there'll be time allowed for that. We just ask that you sit back, relax. This is your time. If you want to take notes, take notes. If you don't, that's so much better. I recommend the latter. I really recommend the latter. And the reason why I recommend the latter is because to take notes becomes an intellectual pursuit, and what we will be discussing over these 3 days is not an intellectual pursuit. It's not an intellectual pursuit. The intellect may want to jump all over it, and that's absolutely fine. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about it if you think overthinking it. Don't. That's all right. We just hope that over the next few days, people can sit in and listen, get quiet, start again. Beginner's mind, as they say in Buddhism. Refresh. Anything we think we already know, let it go. It's not that. I promise you it's not that. So we will put our PayPal email address, which for those who are watching who aren't a part of this live, it is info@freedomthinking.co.uk. That's info@freedomthinking.co.uk. And we welcome any donations. We haven't set a price because we want to make this available to everybody. For those who cannot afford it, we want to make this available to them. But what we do ask for those who cannot afford to make a donation, whether you're watching this live or whether you're watching this on a later date, you're watching this in catch up, because we will put these up on YouTube. We ask, if you can't make a donation, please would you take the time to carry out an act of kindness for somebody else. Pay it forward. Pay it forward with an act of kindness. Do something that you think somebody will absolutely love. Perhaps there's somebody near you who just needs a hand with the garden. Perhaps there's somebody who near you who's not well, and they may just need a friend just to pop round and take the time to go and do it. So for those who cannot afford, please pay it forward with an act of kindness. And we love hearing about those acts of kindness. Again, if somebody would be prepared to tell us what acts of kindness they've paid forward, please email us at info@freedomthinking.co.uk, which is the same as our PayPal ID. So forgive me, my name's Dave Elleray.
And I'm Jenny Elleray. Yeah, it's interesting. I spoke to Keith yesterday just as a bit of a, he's never spoken on one of our retreats before, so he wanted to know a bit more. And he's been writing a book. Sid gave Keith his last writings, and Keith has been kind of creating a book almost in conversation, as if they're sat having a conversation. And he said it feels like kind of Sid is still alive in this conversation he's kind of been having and writing. And one of the stories he said yesterday about Sid's surprise 75th birthday party, and there was about 250 people, and he said the village or the town drunk showed up, and he said kind of in this room of people, Sid was one of the only people he actually knew. And he said most of the, most of the night Sid spent chatting and was just warm and generous and kind of spirit. And he said the message that Sid had, and when he sat and spoke, was incredible, but being around him was just powerful, because he was so present and loving and generous and kind. And he said it was, he lived what he spoke about. And Keith's very, very quick to say he was also a man who had moods and all the rest of it. So it's not sort of putting up there as a guru or not human. But he said his generosity of spirit and his love and kindness just shone from him so much of the time. It was just really nice hearing that story yesterday, and hearing from Keith, who's been around this, it's got to be about 40 years now. And he just said, like, it keeps giving, and he keeps like seeing deeper. And he said it's such a simple message. He said, but his heart just gets filled and filled and filled, because it's what we're pointing to is infinite. And I always remember in the early days when I was learning about this, people would often say it's narrow, but it's deep. And they said it's pretty hard for us to stay narrow, because we kind of want to go off and all over the place and kind of get shallower. But they said if you can stay narrow and deep and point people there and keep taking them back there, they'll see that for themselves and they start their own journey. So I really hope for all of you, like some of you are new to this, some of you have been around it a long time. In May this year, it'll be 19 years since I came across the principles. It's mad. It makes me feel quite old. I don't feel like I'm much older than 19. But I can honestly say it's something that's just evolved and moved and changed me without me having to do a right lot. I'm quoting you. Did you like it?
That sounded very normal.
Yeah, I thought
that was nice. I like that.
So for those of you who don't know me, as I've just said, I came across this 19 years ago. It's 2005. Dr. Roger Mills came over to the UK and ran a program that he called a core course. So it's 3 days, a group of about 30 to 40 of us in London. And it's mad because the way that Roger taught, there was quite a lot of diagrams, and the way that he taught is very different to me. But I didn't really know what was being spoken about, but there's something about Roger and the way that he spoke to us is that he knew that every single being was 100% whole and okay. They just didn't know it. And it felt like over those 3 days, that certainty that he had came alive in me. And my stories of anxiety, depression, eating disorders, all of that collapsed in the knowing that I was okay, and that so was everyone and everything else. And it's mad because I felt so invincible after that. And I had I didn't feel like I could ever get fooled by it again. But believe me, like over the last 19 years, I've been in and out of all different experiences. I've had highs and lows and ups and downs and self-doubt and feeling amazing, and this is the simplest thing ever and it's so amazing and I could just share it forever, and my goodness, what is this? What have I even got to say? Who am I to share? But whatever came alive in me has never ever left. Like, it was there, it was already there, and it came alive, and even though it can feel covered up, I know it's there. So I hope that people kind of listening and watching can start to let that little light that exists like burn through the crap, because our stories and our ideas and our beliefs are so compelling to us. We're so unwilling to let go of them, even though they're not helping us. But actually, if it's a shift in focus towards that light, that wellness, that quiet part of us, keep shifting back to it. Keep shifting back to it. Because it does get quieter and life does get more beautiful if we allow it. I think another thing that was said in those early years was this understanding does the heavy lifting. And I think one of the things I often say when I start working with someone, I'm doing quite a lot of work with teenagers at the moment, is that my kind of role is to hold a space for you, seeing you, knowing you're okay, until you see that for yourself. And then it's almost like I pass on the baton, like as soon as you see that for yourself, I know you're off. So it's almost, that's one of my roles. But the other role is trying to point to what is this understanding? What is it that was kind of imparted to me? And, you know, this isn't an intellectual thing, but we can tell stories, we can point, and we can describe. So I hope that over these few days, and I'm grateful we've got a few days, so that people's minds can quieten down, people can kind of let their egos flare up and questions come, but I hope everyone can settle in and let that awaken in you again and again and again, because I feel like it awakens in me every time we do these things. And quite often now, if I'm spending time with Lucia, her presence and her ability to shift in and out of different moods and experiences blows my mind. Like, she's really getting a proper little personality now, and she really gets pissed off if she can't do something, and allowing her to feel pissed off and still try and do it and figure it out. And then she's so chuffed with herself when she does figure it out. And but she's been, you know, my greatest teacher, and I'm so grateful to have had this understanding as sort of becoming a parent. It's been the biggest gift. So please bear with us over the 3 days, because she may be in and out, we might swap and be in and out. It might be a bit noisy,
yeah, a bit chaotic. We've got a coming up 2-year-old, so she sleeps when she wants to sleep.
Yeah, she's not had a nap today, which is kind of unheard of, so
she'll be ramping up. So please bear with us, please have patience. There may be times when Jen has to nip out, and I don't have breasts. Sweden.
Okay.
You take that.
Yeah,
I don't have breasts, so unfortunately I am of very little use to Lucia. But Jen is, so please bear with us. Jen's just taken a phone call. I think somebody's trying to get one. All right. Yeah, so a little bit about myself. So my name's Dave Elleray. You'll see on there on your screens, possibly if you've got it in gallery view, there'll be a name, Margaret Elleray. That's my mother and father on there. They're the ones that thought I was a good idea at one point and probably changed their minds very swiftly afterwards. So that's a bit of my family lineage on the screen there. But yeah, my name's Dave Elleray, and I came to this in 2013 after a really difficult period of life. Long story short, breakdown of a marriage, blah blah, and fed up with work, and I got to the point where I wanted to take my own life. And yeah, life was pretty rough. I know I'm not the only person on the planet who gets to experience that. I think pretty much everybody on the planet gets to experience that at some point in their life. They get to reach this point of low, It's a real point of low. The point of low, which feels like nobody else on the planet could possibly experience that. You feel so isolated and alone and so lost. And the only thing that makes sense is to leave, shut it off, switch it off, get out of it. Well, that happened to me in 2013. And I'm really, really eternally grateful to a lady called Sue Huginson, who isn't actually on here tonight. A lady called Sue Huginson, who got hold of me at a time when I really needed help, a time when I really needed some love. And she was the lady who introduced me to Sid Banks. Now, I came across Sue through what I consider personally to be a miracle. A few weeks before Sue got hold of me, I got into a big fight up in Scotland. I'd been fell running. I was at a bit of a was at a real sticky point in my life. The only thing I was actually keeping myself alive for was this fell running, mountain running. I used to do a lot of mountain running. Trip with some lads that I know up to the northwest coast of Scotland, one of my favourite places on the planet. I don't know, Leslie, if you've ever spent much time up the northwest coast, but up around Torridon. And long story short, we ended up having to abandon the run because of avalanches, fresh avalanches and massive amounts of snowfall. And we ended up going into a pub and I ended up getting into a scrap. It was a bit of a horrible fight. Whole pub was shut down. And I couldn't believe my life had turned out like this again. Whenever I went out, I always seemed to get into trouble. Who are me? Who are me? Always in trouble every single time I go out. Why do I attract these bloody idiots? I would be like. On reflection, turns out I was the idiot. I set off walking home. I thought it was a good idea, pissed out of my head to set off walking home, 400 miles. Very cold. It was May. Very cold May evening, at 11 o'clock, night time. And it was on this walk where I had my first experience of what I would call a spiritual encounter. And that was, I no longer had a body. And I was in the most beautiful place, the most wonderful space of love, compassion, freedom. Those are words that I can kind of come up with and speak of a wordless space. And when I say wordless space, I mean literally there is no comprehensive idea. You cannot possibly comprehend this space that I ended up in, and I can't. And it was in that space where I was given the name Lucy. And I understood her to be one of my guides. I had no idea about guides. I had no idea that there were other consciousnesses outside of this physical dimension. But it turns out there are. Kia, welcome, love.
Thank you.
Let's let Magnus load on. Welcome, Magnus. But it turns out there are. I had no idea that there was reality outside of this body. It turns out there is. And I don't have no idea how long that experience lasted. But that experience, when I came back to my body, had changed my life. It hadn't allowed me to find happiness. That came later on. But what it did allow me to know was that death is nothing to be afraid of. This life isn't what we think it is. However, it shows up exactly as we think it does. And from that moment onwards, I noticed miracles starting to, what I call miracles, start to take place in my life. When I required something, it showed up. When I asked for help, I got it. I always encourage everybody to speak out loud and speak to people, to speak and ask. In the asking, it is given. We're not on our own on this earthly plane. Many people will be listening to this going, you're not talking principles here, Dave. I'm talking about my experience. And it's all the principles. Consciousness never went anywhere. And then a few weeks later, I asked for happiness. I said, is there any chance will I ever experience happiness? And that was within a few days. Sue got hold of me and she asked me, I was a tree surgeon, and she asked me to go and look at a tree she had in her house that she'd just recently bought. And I'd met this lady once before as a therapist, and I went round to look at this tree, and I got there and she didn't actually have a tree in her garden. So I was really pissed off about this. I was wet, cold, fed up with tree work. Hi, Zoe, look. Fed up with tree work. And I asked her where this tree is, and she just kind of, it's over there, it's over there. And I asked her if she had permission, and she said no. Now I'm really livid. I was a very angry man. Please understand, I was a very, very, very angry man. Every now and again, I still can be. But it's going to mute your mum. Anyway, so Sue sat me down. Sue sat me down. And I always remember her saying, she said, Dave, if I told you why I had to get you here, you wouldn't have come, would you? And I said, I don't know, Sue. Why have you got me here? She said, because I've been told I need to teach you something. I said, and who's told you what? Thinking, I'm going to have a word with them, talking about me behind my back. And that's when she said the universe. And that's when my thought process suddenly went, oh, for fuck's sake. I didn't put two and two together at this point. Sue had had her birthday about 6 weeks before our meeting, this meeting. And on her birthday, she had received the book, The Enlightened Gardener by Sydney Banks, through the post from Amazon, without a single letter, nothing, no indication who it had come from or anything like that. She still doesn't know who sent her it. And she sat down and she read it. And she says when she read it, she disappeared. She said she came back and she realized, she said, that man is talking the truth. And it was Sue who introduced me to Sid. It took me 9 weeks before I'd actually kind of pay any attention, I suppose. And that came after 9 weeks of Sue trying to talk to me about the principles and me not buying the book, The Enlightened Gardener, and me not looking on YouTube to see if there was any Sydney Banks. One day she rung me up to give me an arse kicking, as she called it, and she gave me a right bollocking. She gave me a proper bollocking. She said, all you've done is take from me, Dave. And you've never done anything I ever asked you to do. And I remember sitting in the house, I was ready to go to work, and I remember thinking to myself, she's so right. So that morning I typed in Sid Banks into YouTube and I found four little videos at that time. I remember watching one and I decided, that's it. I'm not going to go to work today. I'm just going to call off. I was self-employed, and I went for a walk, and it was on that walk where suddenly what Sid was talking about made sense. In this video, I distinctly remember him saying, you think it's real. You think it's all real. It's not real. You just think it's real. And I also remember him saying, life is a psychological experience. Life itself is a psychological experience. There's so much in those two messages. There is so much in those two messages. You think it's real. It's not real, you just think it's real. And life itself is a psychological experience. I remember the moment it dawned on me that that was true. The moment I went from living in a world external to myself, thinking that reality was somehow outside of myself and it subjected itself upon me, to witnessing the creation of reality coursing through me. I had created my own depression. I had created my own anxiety. I dreamt it up. I thought it up. I thought it was real. I didn't realize it was a creation of my own mind that with a new change of perspective could look completely different. That's how real it was. It's how fixed, how permanent it actually was. It was an illusion. And I had been speaking to many, many people to try and fix my illusion of life, not knowing it was an illusion of life. And the people who I'd spoken to didn't know it was an illusion of life either. So they were trying to fix my illusion of life by looking at the illusion of life and pointing at the illusion of life and saying, that's the reason why you're not good. And that's the reason why you've got adultery problems, Ellery. And that's the reason why you're depressed. And you will suffer from depression for the rest. I was told you will suffer from depression for the rest of your life. You have chronic depression and you will suffer from it for the rest of your life. You may find ways to deal with it, is what I was told by psychiatrists.
Cope.
Or cope. I was also diagnosed with chemical imbalances of my brain as to the reason why I was suffering with depression and got angry all the time. And I've since come to, through looking at this, I've seen what a fallacy that is, what a barking up the wrong tree that sector of science has done. It is completely false, and I am happy to expand on that over the next few days, my rationale for that. But that is such a falsehood. It truly is. I was always all right. I just didn't know it. That force of love that I experienced before coming across Sid was the fabric of life itself. It's the very essence of life. It's geared. As human beings, it's geared that we forget that. Nature doesn't make mistakes. We are nature. Nature never made a mistake when it made any of us. Nature gave us the ability to experience all feelings. Nature gave human beings the ability to feel every single feeling state that we feel. It never made a mistake in doing so. But somehow I thought I was a broken anomaly. And the moment I woke up and realized I'm not some broken anomaly, I'm a spiritual experience. I'm just the same as everybody else. Deeply humbling realization. I'm just the same as everybody else. There was a freedom found that, like Jen described, never left. Never left. Got forgotten every now and again. Never left. That changed my life. That really did change my life. I'm eternally thankful to Sid. I never got to meet him. Yet, Jen, you got to meet him. I never got to meet him. But it was interesting, even after his death, he could still help people. When Jen and I share the principles, it's not that we're sharing the principles. We're hoping to guide people to the realization of what those three words, mind, consciousness, and thought, truly are. None of them exist independent of one another. They are only one force. The three attributes are the one force of the psychological, experiential, creative force of life. Just a conversation. People sometimes ask us the question, what do the principles say about this? What do the principles say about that? Nothing. They don't have an opinion. They're love. People would often say, are the principles better than CBT? Are the principles better than NLP? No. No, not better. They're two different conversations. The principles are a conversation about how reality is created. And every other psychological approach to try and help people that I've ever come across has always been about what to do with reality, how to shape reality. The principles come prior to that. The principles are a conversation about what is reality. I hope you can see the subtle difference there. Every single therapist that I went to go and see was trying to help me change my reality. Sid's message was different. Sid's message was, do you know what reality is? That you're trying to change it. You want to have a different life, but do you even know what life is? Because as you start to understand what life is, it takes so much off our mind that we think we need to do in order to be a better, more productive, more successful human being. We start to realize the pre-existing already existing perfection of who and what we actually truly are. Sid's message was a beautiful message. There's many people throughout the world who are pointing to the same thing. Some people say, oh, this has got the principles running right through it. Listen to this. Oh, this has got the principles running right through it. Listen to that. Yeah, there's only one truth. There literally is only one truth. Everything that is a creation from that is that in disguise, as Sid said. That includes this very moment. So over this next few days, we hope that as the mind starts to quieten down, it'll hopefully start to reveal itself. It's not in here. You won't get it through this. Peace, which is what it is, acceptance, love, is not an intellectual pursuit. It's like this computer I'm looking at right now. If this computer is trying to bring up a web page or something like that, or I'm typing into it and it's saving and it's having to do a lot of thinking, it's taking energy to do that. That's what we do. We become like this computer that's using up battery, trying to remember, trying to save this. Oh, I must remember that. Oh, I must remember that. But then when the computer sits quietly, it becomes still. Its default setting is stillness. That's like ourselves. It actually takes us effort. We actually effort to suffer. Any suffering is us efforting. Believe it or not. Any suffering, my depression was me efforting at life. So hopefully over this next few days, as we start to quieten down, that will start to make sense. Perhaps we may notice. Chris isn't on here tonight. Not you, Chris, different Chris. He asked me one time on an intensive, he said, Dave, what do you want me to do with this information that you're giving me? And I said, in all honesty, Chris, I just want you to notice. And that's all I say to everybody who's watching this. What do I want you to do? What do we want you to do from this retreat? We want you to notice. That's it. Just notice. Notice what, Dave? Just wait and see. See what you notice. Because what you notice will be perfect for you. There's nobody who is above this conversation. There's nobody who's below it.
Thinking it's I remember driving back into the village I grew up in after my 3 days and seeing it, noticing it. And there's some amazing thatch roofs, and one of them's got like a dog chasing things, and just different incredible thatch roofs. And it's a beautiful little village, and I honestly hadn't really been there before because I had spent so much time in my head, in my insecurities, in my eating disorder, and that was what started kind of showing itself to me. It's just beauty that exists. It existed in that village the whole time I'd lived there. I think I'd been there 20 years at that point. But I just remember it was like stepping into a different world. And I think I used to spend so much time preoccupied with my creations and my stories, and no one had ever pointed out to me in all my therapy that they were stories, they were creations. And I think that's the beauty of this, was it makes sense, it has a logic. And I think that's the thing that really struck me on those few days, and has kind of continued to kind of blow my mind. There's a logic to experience, and I don't ever say that I understand what these 3 principles are truly pointing to. I know I can't intellectually get it, but I get a feel for it, and I see people I speak to start to get a feel for it. And then it's almost like there's this incredible truth or depth that we start to experience, but then and that's impersonal. That's truth that exists and is true for everyone. But then what occurs to us, the insights we have, are so personal and perfect for our life that we start living in a different way. Like, I often laugh and say one of the things that really came to me was that I needed to speak up more and be a bit more honest and a bit more forthcoming, and not always just kind of shy away and think everyone else knew better. And I needed to speak up more, and I needed to stick up for myself sometimes. Didn't mean getting into fights or anything, but I just needed to be a little bit more confident in that way. And I've said sometimes it seems the insight you've had is you're better off keeping your mouth shut.
You go,
and you keep learning that. And it's almost like you see, like, we've both learned about these principles, and I've learned I need to speak up more, and you've learned I need to keep my mouth shut more. But it's so interesting because it's the same principles that we're pointing to. It's the same truth again and again and again. And then what comes from that is ways to live a more beautiful life. Like, it will start serving you in a different way. Like, I wasn't following wise thought as a teenager and in my early 20s. I was following the thought of I'm not good enough, I'm separate, no one understands. No one understands what it's like. It is so hard being me. I don't know how to live in this world. It's too hard. I'm too sensitive. This is too much. I just don't know how to live here. They don't understand. And then suddenly I remember sitting in that room and realizing, but I'm not special in those kind of ways of thinking. Lots of people think like that. We all think our experience is somehow worse, or people just don't get it. And it's true, it is individual. But there's a logic to why we feel like we feel. And it's a misunderstanding or a misuse of the power of thought when we start to suffer it. Because it is a gift. Like, I've heard these principles we've spoken about as a gift so many times, and I see it more and more. We have the gift of experience. We have the gift to create a life and a reality. Like life, reality, experience, feelings. They're all words to try and describe the same thing. We have been given a gift to have a life here on earth, an experience. And believe me, I did not think life was a gift up until the age of 23. It felt like you often say, an endurance test. It was difficult. Life was just hard, and I didn't notice the beautiful trees that existed in my village. I didn't notice the thatched roofs. Like, walking through with Lucia now, I'm seeing it again. You know, I'm 42. I've lived there since I was 3 years old. She will notice the smallest little rock in the wall, and then there's a pattern on it, and there's shapes, and then she'll start saying that shape's mummy, and that shape's Sia, and one shape's daddy, and then she'll see an ant or a ladybird. And she's been desperate to get into the church, but every time we've gone, it's been closed. And this time we happened to see the guy with the key, and he was like, I'm just about to lock up, but you can come in. And he showed us around, and she's just like, in this church, like, I spent so much time in that church with Chris Dingles and different things we did with the school. And my mum used to be in the choir, and it was, in my mind, cold and boring. And then suddenly Lucia's in there, and she's like, wow, I've wanted to be in that big wooden door and see what was behind it for months. And it's been so wonderful. And I feel like the experience of coming across the principles to me was like getting more childlike, getting more interested. And like your sister often says, like when she got home from her kind of wake up of seeing this, she sat in her living room for the first time and had like a cup of tea and was like, this is my living room, and my goodness, isn't it dusty? Like, because we are so preoccupied in our minds, we're so interested in what thoughts are running through. And we think we will notice beauty and we'll be present once we deal with all this stuff. We don't recognize that the only thing taking us away from the present moment is all that stuff that's going on in our mind. We're still here in the present moment. I am sat in the living room right now. Wow, how did that happen? Did that happen? Could everyone see that? Did you see it? All fireworks went off on our screen. Yeah, I don't even know how that happened. We've got a new computer. That's completely taken my train of thought. How did it happen?
I'm the computer user, non-technical.
I have a feeling that Lucia might be coming to visit in a minute.
Susan's trying.
That was so weird.
Thank you, Susan.
I might have to go and get
Are you going to do the baby thing?
Yeah.
Well done. We had a bit of a run there, didn't we? Oh, Lucia's downstairs again. Yeah, I think we're all right. Need some daki, which is milk. There'll probably be quite a few pauses in this. Some quiet moments. I like the quiet moments. I don't know about anybody else's life, but my life isn't really always full of quiet moments just to be, especially not with a coming up 2-year-old. But it's in that stillness. It's in that quiet. It's in that just being here, where you are. Wherever that be. It's not dependent upon circumstance. Just give me 1 second. We're just going to shut the door. But will probably be moments where we just, I don't know, it just goes quiet. And that's all right. Lots of people get uncomfortable with silence. You know, if they're with somebody and it goes quiet, quite often people get uncomfortable. If you're one of those people, you're going to have a really shit time. But hopefully you'll grow to love it. How you doing, Joseph? What the heck was that? Did you see that? Oh, I don't like this. It's all that AI stuff, isn't it? Reality. As I've come to understand it personally. I understand I'm only scratching the surface of it. That's very exciting for me. To become aware of something that you realize you've only just started to scratch the surface of something so fascinating and interesting and wonderful, full of opportunity. Like I said, I don't think I'll be on my own when I said I believe reality was something that was taking place outside of me and I simply observed it. I moved through, I lived as though I moved through reality. As though somehow reality is external to me and it is influencing me, it's affecting me, it's something I have zero say over. It was a very harrowing place to live in that experience of life. It was a very harrowing place to live because I never knew what was coming next, which I still don't. But to live life with the idea of threat around every single corner, something that's going to set me off balance, that's going to tip me over the edge, that's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back, was a really, really terrifying place to live. And when I'm talking about things like that, I'm talking about things like relationships, finances, people, lads on nights out, men in general, for me personally. You know, I was a man who was actually very, very afraid of men. Maybe a spouse, weather. Some people don't, you know, get affected by weather, so they think. Where they live, time. All these things appear to have a bit of a chokehold on me. And in Three Principles, some people call that outside in. Living as though the external world or the illusion, when I say the illusion, I'm talking about time. When I'm talking about the external world, I'm talking about time as well. Even thoughts. Living as though somehow I'm a victim of it. And I have no power to change it. to suddenly seeing the fallacy of that point and realizing it is all the same thing. The whole of life is the same thing. And I am creating it. Pure liberation. Freedom. I found freedom in a moment. I didn't work on myself. There was nothing, I didn't need to work on myself. I just needed to start to understand life. Many people think that they need to work on themselves in order to find spirituality or find spirit or become more spiritually awake. I suggest the opposite. We are already all spiritually awake. We're just covering up with the idea that we're not, and we need to work on something in order to find it. That's why I like to point out it's in the noticing. It's in the noticing of the illusions that we think are real. Our experience of life. I'm not saying my life isn't real. I'm not saying anybody's life isn't real, but the experience that we encounter, that's a potential. It could have been any other experience apart from it wasn't. And as we start to wake up bit by bit by bit by bit, we start to find a common sense. And this common sense then starts to dictate our life more, starts to guide us more. We start to notice, we start to use our gift of memory and see what worked and what didn't work, how I may do things differently next time. The gift of memory is thought. The gift of memory is what creates the illusion of the past. Past doesn't actually exist. I'm looking out the window right now and I can't see the past. I can see evidence, but it only exists now. The more we start to become aware of how reality is born, how reality is created, and we start to become aware of its illusions, the more simple life becomes. It's really, really interesting. Jenny and I did some work out in South Africa. We were working in a township, a demographic of people very, very different to myself, from the northwest corner of England. It was a real gift. It's a real, real gift to work with those people. Wonderful, beautiful, beautiful souls. But I remember one training we gave, I was really nervous. I was really, really nervous starting it off. It was a 3-day event like this. We're working in this charity called Africa Tikkun. I think it's the biggest charity in South Africa. And we were working with staff. And I remember being so nervous, and I stood at the front and we had 26 people, all black, some coloured, my apologies, some coloured. Please nobody jump down my throat and say you can't say coloured. It's how they describe themselves. And I'm not going to do them the injustice of giving them some other name that they don't call themselves. They call themselves the coloured people, South African coloured people. Some coloured, some Zimbabweans, some black South Africans, some Nigerians. And I remember standing at the front of this room and I just blurted out, okay, do you want to give me your problems? And then I kind of stood there shocked. I couldn't believe what I just said. And yeah, I'll give you my problems, Dave. No problem. I'll give you my problems. And I remember these things coming out. They started talking about their contracts at work. Contracts coming to an end. What am I going to do at the end of these 6 months? What am I going to do? Problems such as I've got problems at home with my kid. He's got depression. My son, he's got depression. Problems such as my relationship's not working so well. My marriage is falling apart. Then there were things like, my daughter's a prostitute. My daughter's on crystal meth. My son was murdered. I'm currently housing my nephew and I'm hiding him from gangsters and the police. This township was called Mufloweny, which is a suburb of Kailicha, which is one of the murder capitals of the world. When we told people where we were working, they were like, you're idiots. But we always felt safe. We always felt looked after. And I remember for that 3 days, after when I wrote it down on a flip chart, I had 4 pages of writing, 26 people coming up with the problems. I remember then speaking, like thinking to myself, looking at all these problems and going, Ellery, you idiot. You know nothing about any of these problems. You know nothing about these problems. And in all honesty, I crapped myself. I thought, where the hell do you go now, you bloody idiot? And this little voice just came in my head and said, you don't need to talk to them about the problems. That's not what you're here for. You're here to explain reality to them, your understanding of reality, what you've come to find. So for 3 days, Jenny, myself, and a lady called Jill Baronetti, a wonderful lady from Cape Town, we spoke about what we'll be sharing with you on this screen. 3 days. After 3 days, we went back to the chart and I noticed some people had already put lines through their problems. And we went round the room at the end. And one by one, we crossed every single problem off. 4 pages worth, flip chart paper. 4 pages, 26 problems. Every single one got a line put through it. And we asked people, you know, like, why are you putting a line through it? And they'd say, I see that differently now. I've got a different perspective on it. Or they'd say something like, I've come up with a new idea about that. I've kind of solved the problem. I'm like, wonderful. And I remember the feedback we got from that was things like racism was killed, stopped dead. And when I'm talking about racism, I'm talking about racism towards Jenny, Jill, and myself because we were white, but also between the coloured and black, the black Nigerian, the black Zimbabwean, black South African. That got quieter and in some cases completely disappeared. And we saw that quite a bit in South Africa, probably the most divided country on the planet. One of them, historically, probably one of the longest historically divided countries on the planet. We saw this division collapse, just like that. And having the gift, being given the gift to go out and see that take place, has given me the gift to understand that this truly is the way to solve the world's problems. It's through understanding. It's through us starting to wake up to the nature of who and what we are. Every single one of us. It's from us starting to understand that reality is not coming to us, it's coming through us, it's coming from us. When people start to have that realization, they start to wake up, for want of a better word, spiritually. Understand spiritually is just a word to describe metaphysical, if that's even the right word, is to describe that creates. And when we start to realize this is what Sid was pointing to. He was pointing to wake up, creator, wake up, creator. Wake up, creator. Notice what you're doing. Notice how you're using your gift of thought, consciously or unconsciously, to create an experience that you call your life, that you think is real. And when you start to wake up and realize that's exactly what's going on, we are creating this experience of life continuously. Continuously, this experience is coursing through us effortlessly. Nobody ever taught us how to do this. What a miracle. Nobody ever taught us how to create experience. We just create experience. We just experience experience. My sister's just come in. She'll be another person who'll be joining us on this. My sister's a wonderful light. She receives messages pretty much every single day. Some of them are personal to her, and some of them are for the world. She is writing a book at the moment, but she's got pretty much how many? She's received pretty much one message every single day for 4 or 5 years, 6 years. So she's got thousands of messages, and we'll be sharing some of them with you lot. She receives messages from somebody called Sophia, Lisa says. Sophia is the name of wisdom. And she really receives some beautiful wisdom, does Lisa. She's just come in, so I'll just jog my memory to tell you that Lisa will be joining us. You may, over the next few days, get to the point where you're like, come on, what's the point? Speak to the point. What's the point? You cannot speak to the point. Like I said at the beginning, there are no words to describe who and what we truly are. There is no word to describe life that encapsulates it, that summarizes it, that explains its mystery. Human beings did not create human beings. We're not one of our great inventions. There is a force that does exist. It's real. And it creates. And everything that exists is made out of it. Everything is made out of itself. Everything it creates is made out of itself. And everything that is created out of itself is an experience. Can you hear background talking in this? May I just ask? No. Everything that is created is made out of itself. Like waves on an ocean. So there is something that creates the reality of existence. And then from within that reality of existence, we all have this capacity to create again, using the same force that created us in the first place, because there's no separation from it. The separation from the whole never once took place. It appears to have done. That's why we have over here and over there, and you and me, and tomorrow and yesterday, and good and bad and right and wrong, and all the dualities of life. All illusions. Like a wave saying it was separate from the next wave. Like a tsunami being separate from the ripple. Deeply connected, never separated. But with the capacity to create their own experience. Each wave has its capacity to create its own life, to create its own reality from within itself. What do you ask them, look, just to keep it a bit quieter? And that's what we're starting to wake up to here on Earth. And in doing so, we're going to change this world. We're going to change this world for the better. One of the things I remember from my Sid Banks experience, after listening to Sid, was I was told there are gifts within consciousness and thought that humanity is not consciously evolved enough yet to utilize, but it's coming. And what I took from that was things like healing, all the clairs, audience, etc. Clairvoyance, to be able to see different reality. This all exists. It exists for us now. It's just waiting for us to step into it, to raise our frequency of being. How do we do that? We do that by letting go of that isn't real. Because it's only that's stopping us from tapping into this. By starting to become aware, to starting to notice our own bullshit, our beliefs. Sid Banks said, there is no peace to be found in beliefs. There is no peace to be found in any belief. Why? So we'll always defend a belief. Belief is the creation of ego. It's why we have war on this planet. It's why we have suffering. It's why we have hate. It's why we have division. Because we believe our beliefs to be correct, and therefore others to be wrong. There's no peace to be found in beliefs. And that's how people start to wake up. That's how peace starts to emerge. That's one of the things we saw in South Africa so often, was when, I remember when Jen and I sat at the front of this class the very first time. That day one, nobody spoke to us apart from one coloured lady. I didn't know she was coloured. She said, you probably won't even know I'm coloured. I said, I'm sorry, I didn't know. She said, no, she didn't expect you to. She said, but I am. She said, did you notice I was the only person who spoke to you? And we were like, yeah, you spoke an awful lot. Nobody else said a thing. And she said, yeah, she said, the rest of them are black. She said, they don't trust you. She said, why would they? She said, us coloured people, she said, we had a very different relationship to the white people. We were gained far more, given far more privilege. We're far more favoured than the black people. She said, so us coloured people have a far better relationship with white people than the black people. She said, if you want them to speak, you've got to gain their trust. Anyway, day 2 came, and I remember driving into Cape Town and it started raining. And if it rains in Cape Town, all the traffic stops dead. Even if you get like 6 drops that hit the road, that's it, traffic stops. It's weird. It just kind of grinds to a halt. And I said to you, didn't I? I said, what the hell are we going to do about this they're not speaking to us problem? And I just said, right, fuck it, we're going to hit this head on. Let's go for it. Let's hit this straight on. And we sat down, they all came back. We kind of, you call it voluntold. They're voluntold to turn up. And I remember sitting there and I just said, right, there's a big white elephant in this room and it's me and Jenny. What do you see in us as white people? Then they started speaking. You white people. Fingers came out. You white people, you have easy lives. You white people, you are rich. You white people don't go to prison. You white people don't have drink problems, drug problems. You white people don't have problems in your communities. Do you remember any more?
I think you covered it.
Yeah, it was just like, when we sat there and we listened to this, what they saw in Jenny and I remember sitting there and saying, is that honestly what you see in us? And they're like, yes. I said, all right. I said, I can honestly say I've done every single one of those things that you say we white people don't do, apart from be rich. You've had drink problems, drug problems? Yeah. I've been to prison. But you're white. White people don't go to prison. They do. Their attitudes really changed towards us. They became more open when they saw that their beliefs weren't true. They just assumed, they looked at us and assumed. And perhaps we looked at them and assumed certain things. But after that 3 days, they were saying to us, you're my brother, you're my sister. My brother, my sister, you must come and stay with us. My brother, my sister, we're going to take you out for a braai. And they took us out into the middle of Kailicha. Again, that township, which is one of the murder capitals of the world. They took us out into Kailicha. And we went into the middle of it. And we went to Mazzoli's and had this braai. And we were so well looked after. They looked after us. They loved us. And we frigging fell in love with those people. I hold such a place in my heart for those people. I love them dearly. I miss them dearly.
I think the other thing that was beautiful about that experience was kind of we went in so excited to be able to kind of bring the principles to a community, and we knew there was kind of a lot of poverty and a lot of violence in this community, so we were kind of really excited to kind of get projects going. But it was so humbling because the resilience, the genius of this group of, I think that the first group was just women, this group of women just blew us away. And the lady who had told us sort of about some of the cultural things and things that we probably should have looked into, like we should definitely do our research before we do events in different groups of people. This lady Susan, she said some of the examples she used were, I remember we had this big problem. Our church needed money and we were all worrying. We had this big problem. We didn't know what to do. And then suddenly it came into my head, who has money in this community? She's like, the drug dealers.
The gangsters.
The gangsters. So she said, I went to the gangsters and I went to the drug dealers and I said, our church needs money. And I know you've got money. And she said they gave. But I loved it because her examples of where genius had come or insight had come for her, like, just blew us away. And some of the stories that she had. And again, it was kind of that feeling of what Sid uncovered or what was revealed to him and what he was pointing towards and what woke up in me. And then I try and share and point to, and it's alive in all of us. It exists already before we ever heard of the three principles. And I think that was the lovely thing. Like, this group of women were so resilient and so incredible. And some of the experiences that they'd been through in their lives, like the lady Susan, she would say her son had been murdered. Her daughter was on tick and was a prostitute. She was harbouring her nephew at that point, who was hiding from police and gangsters. And she just had these stories, but then this joy and the movement and the dance and the
laughing. And
it's funny because on the day 2, another lady joined our group and she said, well, we always start our trainings with an icebreaker. And we were like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, maybe we should ask people, how do you normally start your trainings? And she said, right, so what we're all going to do, we're going to stand at the front of the room, one after the other, and we're going to spell our name with our bodies. And at this point, I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to do that. I'm too embarrassed to do that. But we all did it. And I think they laughed at us and they said, you're like robots. That's what they were saying to us, because they were just like moving. And it was so lovely to see, like, our own, like, we've got this amazing message and we want to share it, and it's true. But actually it was like this group learning and this aliveness that happened with us all.
That was wonderful. And
it was humbling, because you're like, wow, I never even considered to ask you, how do you start your groups normally? What do you do in this organisation that kind of helps break the ice? That helps bring us together? And actually, if we'd thought to do that on day 1, it probably would have started a bit different. Yeah. But it was all learning. And I think that's the beauty, that you'll just continually learn. And you'll think that you know something, and then you'll get humbled, and you'll come across people in this life that you'll listen to and you'll see, wow, this is true. There's nothing that breaks the human spirit. There's the appearance of broken and there's the appearance of damaged. And we'll maybe feel that for ourselves at times, but it's the appearance, it's not true. And I think that's the wonderful thing that starts to kind of show. And today's been such a wonderful example. We always use the weather, like, that sky exists and through comes weather. Today we have had hail, we have had rain, we have had the brightest sunshine, the fluffiest of clouds, the blackest of clouds. And now we're just left with all these droplets on the window, with the sun coming through, droplets on the trees outside, but it looks gorgeous. But you never would have realised that was possible earlier, because it was just hailstones and freezing cold. And I feel like I've kind of been through, like, oh my goodness, we're still out in town. I need to get home and get Lucia lunch, and then in bed, and she needs to be like this. And I had all my expectations of how I thought today needed to go so that we could be ready for 3 o'clock. And none of it happened. But I'm still sat here and I'm okay. And yeah, I stressed myself out a bit. But it was nice, because at one point I was waiting for you and my niece to come back to the van. But Lucia wanted to go and sit on the grass. And then she's like, ladybird. It's like, there is a ladybird there. You're right. And then she sat trying to peel an orange, like she wants to do it herself now. And like, she's learning to do stuff. And we just got present together. And I was like, today's not going as I thought it should go, but I'm still alive. It's fine. We've got time. And I think we can often hear about the principles or another spiritual teaching and kind of have these ideas of how we're supposed to show up, or what it will mean when we understand, or this better version of ourselves that we hold up and compare ourselves to. But that better version, you often will say this, like, if you could keep comparing yourself to this made up idea of who you should be, you'll continually be dissatisfied, because we're never going to get to that, because we're just here now. And we're going to get caught up and stressed and fed up. And happy and present and life's easy and lovely and I'm not even thinking about life, I'm just living, and then it's hard and we're trudging through. And I think if we can start giving ourselves a break and giving other people a break, we're all in this together, we're all learning, we're all kind of scrambling around at times. But it's that kindness thing. Like, I know that if I see somebody else, like especially Lucia, if she's struggling or she's overtired, I am so loving and kind and patient with her. When Dave's really like tired and exhausted and maybe stressing out, I can take it really personally, and I can not be kind and loving. I can like up my ante and be like, well, if you're going to be in a mood, I can be in a bigger mood, and then you see it, and you wake up again, and you can say sorry, or you can offer a cup of tea. And this is so everyday and so ordinary human. Please don't think one of my misunderstandings was that at some point I was going to transcend human and negative feelings, or what we call negative feelings. I was somehow going to get life sussed, and I'd just float around and be loving and kind and open-hearted and generous and all the time. I was going to be a saint. Is where I was headed, and it was really disappointing. I'm like, oh my god,
As though a saint isn't human.
I can still get really judgmental, or I can still get really insecure, and it's like, so what? I think that's one of the things that came to us. So what? This is it. This is my life. This is it, guys. Like right now, sat listening to this, out on a walk, in a living room, don't know about the screens that aren't there. This is the principles in action. This is life taking form. It's incredible. I don't know how that works. I can talk about it, and I can I know that seeing the power of thought as a creative force within me, coming through me, blew my mind. Like starting to get a sense of that. This power of thought is living, breathing us right now. It's incredible. That power of thought, that energy, that source is what powered the weather, is powering that tree. Like that source is just aliveness. And it blows my mind, because I don't know what aliveness really is. Could this all just be a dream? If it's just a dream, then what's the dreamer? I don't know. It's fascinating. One of the things I've often heard you say, Dave, is when you start asking bigger questions, you get bigger answers. And I always used to be asking, why do I feel so bad? Why am I so insecure? Why is life so hard? And I got loads of things that would come to mind about why. But I think the principles, it did something for me, where I started being like, what is life? What is this stuff? What is mind? What is God? What is that intelligence? These are all just words. But what is it? And I've had so many lovely just little things drop in, and depths of feelings within me that I didn't know existed through this understanding, both stunningly beautiful and then really, really painful. But I could see in the face of all of that, nothing broke me. Nothing could touch me. Like, we're not of this world of form. And I think, like I'll say it again, my biggest teacher has been having Lucia. I know other people that have had children similar age to Lucia now, and they're really not enjoying it. They're not being their biggest teacher, they're just the biggest nuisance, and they're waiting to get their life back. So I know it isn't Lucia, but there's something that's happened since she's been born, where the miracle of it all has just blown me away again. Looking at her and like saying to Dave, like she was inside me, like that intelligence of life grew a baby inside me. And I've known that happens. I kind of know about the birds and the bees, and I knew that I've seen other people pregnant. But for it to be within me and to experience that, and now see this little being running around, I'm in awe of whatever this life stuff is, this energy, this source. And I think we're not really guided to be in awe of life and look at the intelligence and look at the source. And we're kind of encouraged to analyze and overthink and work on ourselves and all of those things. But life doesn't have to be that way. We can be more childlike and present. And like, it's blowing us away how much Lucia learns every day, and like the language now that she's having and things that she knows. Like, she was in the supermarket with Auntie Cisa yesterday, and Lisa was trying to get alcohol-free beers, and then there's one called Ghost Ship, and Lucy's like, Daddy's beer. And then when Dave came over, Lisa was like, Dave, do you drink Ghost Ship? And he's like, yeah, that is what I drink. And you're like, at some point she's seen that label, that's Daddy's, she's recognized it. What kind of intelligence is that living her, growing her? That's within us. But we get lost in our stories.
I think we start just taking it really seriously.
And identifying with a character that we didn't even know we created.
I think that's one of the things about Luce, like, she doesn't take any of it seriously, does she? She gets pissed off, she gets irate, and then she's over. Like the weather. She's not analysing herself. She's noticing. She's just noticing life. She lives very, 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 very much in the moment. Where we all live, apart from we forget. I often think the moment, the now, another word to describe that would be God. The now being another word for God. The now. The moment, this, here, right now. And I often think that, I notice that people have very deep, profound spiritual experience when they become present. When they come out of time. When they come out of time, where is time? Time is within the mind. Time is created from thought. Thought exists in time. No, time exists in thought, sorry. Thought does not exist in time. Thought exists in the now. The future is our imagination. It doesn't exist anywhere on the face of the earth. It is a creation of our mind. It's a thought. The future is a thought. The past, well, that's our memory, which is thought. So time exists in thought. Thought does not exist in time. Thought exists in the now. And when people discover that, when people start to discover the now, they often have a spiritual experience. That's why Eckhart Tolle wrote the book, The Power of Now. And why Jesus in the book of Thomas said, become a passerby. Understand you are seeing each moment for the very first and the very last time in the eternal now. And people who've discovered this moment of presence have these awakening experiences. Why? Because they meet the very, very moment, the very, very fabric of creation. They meet the Creator where it is stood in the now. And how do these people have these realizations? Well, anything that's realized, if you have a realized human being, it's taken place from within them. They've noticed. To realize is simply to notice. Oh, I realized this. Oh, I noticed that. 2 words to describe the same experience, same kind of experience. They noticed something. Again, we're going back to that word because that's all I'm encouraging anybody to do is just notice. Just notice. Just notice. You start to become aware, you start to notice when you're getting lost in time. Oh, there I go again, worrying about the future. It doesn't exist. Notice that the future doesn't exist. Anybody who's worrying about this world going to hell, it's just this, right here, right now. It's all that actually exists. The rest of it is a fabrication of our mind. It doesn't matter how reliable the source of information about the future is. It's just a fabrication of our own mind. It doesn't exist. There's just here and now. Likewise with the past. And I was told that it was my events that took place in my past, which were the source of my suffering, which were the source of my depression. That was bullshit. Sid pointed this out. It was such a beautiful thing to point out to people. It doesn't exist. Your past does not exist. So if you're blaming the past for how you feel now as the source of your experience in the now, right here, right now, right this very moment, or any moment, you're living in an illusion. Wake up, notice. Notice the past doesn't exist. So therefore it has no power over you now. So what does actually have power over you right now? Nothing. Nothing. You determine how you experience anything. I determine how I experience anything. I am solely responsible for my response, my feeling state, the way I perceive any given moment. I can meet one person one moment and think, yeah, I'm not too sure about you, and 10 minutes later I've fallen in love with them. Things can change in front of our eyes in a moment. Why? Because our inside changes. What looks like it's outside is actually an experience from within. It looks like all our emotions are created from circumstance. They're not. They're created from consciousness. They're created from thought. They're created from within our own being. When Sid was talking about thought, people quite often then start going to thinking. Oh, I know what you're talking about. But what about this thought, Dave? What about that thought? When we're talking about thought, we're not talking about thinking. That's the details. The old saying, the devil's in the details. That's how we get tangled up and end up in hell, by staring at the details, trying to figure out the details, using the detail maker, the intellect. But when Sid was talking about the power of thought, he had a beautiful message. He had the most phenomenal message. You, and like everybody else on earth, like every other thing on earth, like every other thing within the universe, is endowed with the creative capacity to create an experience. Is endowed with this force that we call thought. It's ours. It's our force. Now, thought is infinite. It has no beginning and no end. You'll never run out of thought. It is infinity itself. There's no end to how we can look at things, what we can create. Ideas we can dream up, music we could write, or books we could write, or films we could write, or whatever. Clothes we could dream up. Garden designs, houses. Oh, we can dream up all kinds of things, all from thought. New technologies, all from thought. All thought. All created from thought. What is thought? What is thought? I remember Sue asking me that question, Dave, what is thought? What is it? I was 33 years old and I remember getting pissed off at that question, thinking to myself, what a stupid question. You'd ask a 4-year-old that question. Don't ask a 33-year-old man that question, was the kind of crap that was running through my head at that time. I think she must have picked up on it, because when I responded with, it's an idea, she said, well done, Dave. That's a use of thought. But what is thought? What is thought? What is it? I remember reflecting on that question for a few moments and then coming back with the answer, I don't know. And she smiled and she looked me right in the eye and she said, neither do I. You can't know it. It's infinity. How can you possibly know infinity? But what an exciting prospect to wake up and discover that's who and what we are made of. What we are made of. We're made of this infinite force. If that's true, and I am the creator, what do I want to create? Perhaps we wake up to begin with and realize the bullshit we've actually created and lived out of as though it was real and true. And when we start to do that, when we start to recognize that illusion that was posed to us as a fact, we start to regain our strength from our own ignorance. We start to take back our power from ignorance itself, misunderstanding. And we start to stand in our power more. We start to discover what's useful in life. Things that wise people throughout time, such as forgiveness, forgive and you'll go to heaven, start to make sense. Forgive and you will go to heaven. Why? Don't forget, there's nothing but the now. So therefore, heaven and hell must be in the now. And they must be states of being. Because the moment we forgive, we feel lighter. I always remember a lady in South Africa, in Cape Town, one of the programs we ran, she had her phone stolen. She lived in a township and a neighbor stole her phone. And the moment she realized that happened, she ran down to this house and she brayed on the door. And this lady opened the door and she said, I screamed at her and I pushed her and she said, I shouted at her, I called her names for stealing my phone. And she said, and then her husband came through. She said, I pushed him and she said, I just wanted him to beat me so I could phone the police. She said, they stole my mobile phone. She was telling me this after on day 2 of one of our programs that Jen and I run. And she said, and then I ran through into the other room and her brother was trying to fix my phone quickly. She said, but my phone wasn't broken. They'd broken my phone. And she said, with that, I left. She said, and I sat on my sofa and she cried and she was really upset. And she said, and then I came to your training yesterday, she said, and it made no sense. It made no sense, she said. But I went home last night and I sat on my sofa again and she said, all of a sudden, I find myself stand up and walk back down to the house and I knocked on the door. And she said, I said to this lady, she answered the door, she said, I'm sorry for how I spoke to you yesterday. I said, you said what? She said, I said, I'm sorry for how I spoke to you yesterday. And she said, then her husband came through and she said, I apologized to him as well. She said, I'm sorry for how I spoke to you yesterday. And she said, I told them, she said, we are neighbors. I will need you and you will need me. She said, I'm sorry for how I spoke to you. She said, but however, I will take my mobile phone back now. And she said, and with that, they went and got my mobile phone and gave it to me. She said, I'm going to fix this. She said, and I don't want to think about this ever again. And she stood there in front of me and I said, so let me get this straight. This was blowing my mind at this point. I said, they stole your mobile phone and you forgave them for it. And she said, yes. I said, do you not feel like you mugged yourself just a little bit? You know, they nicked your mobile phone. And she said, no, Dave. She said, Dave, the weight of the world came off my shoulders. She went to heaven. She ended up in a higher state of being. She wasn't living in hell through holding the grudge. As we start to wake up, those kind of teachings that have been passed down to us throughout time start to make common sense, and you realize the wisdom that is held within the knowledge of all times. that's been passed down through people. And you get to see what is wise and what isn't. You start to get more discerning. Heaven and hell, states of being in the now. They're states of consciousness. They're not somewhere you go to when you die. If my experience is anything to go by, there is no suffering. Zero. There's nothing judging. The only thing that judges is an ego, an intellect. It's only that lives in the apparent duality of life. The rest of it's just pure love. There's nothing that any of us need to do to enter heaven. It's an ever-present state. It's like suffering. It always exists. It's just, do we enter that frequency of being or not? Do we create that frequency of being and enter into it? All potentials exist at the same time. That's according to quantum physics. That's why Sid said, raise your level of consciousness and you'll come out of suffering. Raise your level of awareness, raise your level of understanding, draw out more love. As we raise our level of understanding, as we start to awaken, as we start to make sense of life, the illusion starts to become apparent. Our experience changes for the, I call the better. What does that mean? We become more loving, more compassionate, more forgiving, more present, less tied up in the future or the past. More excited about life. More honest. More humble. You find yourself judging other people for doing stuff you probably did 5 minutes ago and catching yourself. And I think you just notice more beauty around you, like Lucia.
Also, I think we've said watching Lucia and a little character developing, you see the absolute innocence. Like she is unconsciously picking up stuff from you and I and people around her all the time, creating ideas about the world and herself. And you see like this little ego, this little character developing, and it's not on, we don't do it on purpose. It's just what happens as we, we're born into this infinite field of potential, and then we start pulling on different thoughts and identifying with them. It's totally natural. And you see animals, they all, different dogs, they have different characters. They just take on beliefs and they're learning, and it's totally innocent. And I thought because of how I'd been brought up, my dad was very, very anxious. My dad was this. That's why I was like that. And it's true that I looked to my parents and kind of, I learned and picked up things unconsciously. So it's unconscious conditioning. But it was interesting that when I didn't know that's what it was, I bought into it. Coming across the principles, I saw that all conditioning is a thought, it's a belief, and some of it's totally, totally invisible to us. Like I'm finding myself sometimes saying things or doing things, I'm like, oh, my mum used to do that. Then I heard my mum the other day, because Lucia ran into the table, and my mum was like, tap the table, naughty table. And I'm like, that's exactly what my grandma used to do. There's been a few times recently, Lucia has said, naughty daddy. I'm like, oh, well, I've never used that terminology, but it's my mum saying naughty Bilbo for whatever he's done, and the naughty table. It's mad, but I would love it if that kind of, if we can have that love and compassion that you spoke about, but first for ourselves, like we're all just doing the best we can given how we see the world, given how we think. And I remember hearing Roger speak about that on my first course, and it was incredible because it was, I saw that for myself, and then I suddenly saw it for my family, my friends, and it just went out and out and out and out and out. And the levels of compassion that I've found have existed since coming across this understanding are amazing, because you see the innocence. I can see it in Lucia so clearly. She's just picking stuff up, learning stuff. I don't think she ever thought, I'm going to learn what kind of beer Dad likes. Like, it's just gone in, that information. And then there's other stuff I'd love her really to get a sense of, like, do not grab the dog like that. And it's not gone in yet. She still keeps doing it. At some point, she'll hopefully get that one.
For F's sake.
Yeah, I said for F's sake earlier. She went, for F's sake. And I was like, oh.
Lucky you said F.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But still, it was just, I was like, I can't believe she's starting to say like the last 2 or 3 words of what you say, even if it's just a sentence about what you're doing, she's repeating
like
it.
Parrot, isn't it?
But I've just noticed the time. So it's 5 o'clock UK time now. We want people to have a good break before Keith comes on at 6:30.
Which is 1.5 hours away for those that are on UK time.
Because he'll be speaking for a couple of hours, and then we'll have half an hour at the end, because I'd love to hear how people have found the first day. So Keith will speak from 6:30 p.m. UK to 8:30 p.m. UK, and then we'll have until 9 o'clock just to hear from people and kind of get feedback and any ideas of things people might like to speak about tomorrow. But we'd like it if people could go off now and just have a bit of time out. And I know somebody's just joined.
Here.
But I think you were a bit on earlier, so yeah, sorry, you were just rejoined. And we're saying it's a break. If you go off and have an hour and a half, but maybe come back. Do we say maybe an hour and 20?
Yeah.
And we're all ready for when Keith joins at 20:30.
Hour and 20, hour and 25. So we make a start at in an hour. Making a start in an hour and a half from now, wherever you are in the world.
But we'll be here from an hour and 20.
Yes. Loads of love, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and look forward to seeing you soon. Pause or stop.